This is another sign of the times, an analysis and a commentary. The United States abandons hope for a Taliban peace deal. With the surge of American troops over and the Taliban still a potent threat, American generals and civilian officials acknowledge that they have all but written off what was once one of the cornerstones of their strategy to end the war, battering the Taliban into a peace deal. The once ambitious American plans for ending the war are now being replaced by the far more modest goal of setting the stage for the Afghans to work out a deal among themselves in the years after most Western forces depart, and to ensure Pakistan is on board with any eventual settlement. Military and diplomatic officials here and in Washington said that despite attempts to engage directly with Taliban leaders this year, they now expect that any significant progress will come only after 2014, once the bulk of NATO troops have left. "I don't see it happening in the next couple of years," said a senior coalition officer. "It's a very resilient enemy, and I'm not going to tell you it's not," the officer said. "It will be a constant battle, and it will be for years." The failure to broker meaningful talks with the Taliban underscores the fragility of the gains claimed during the surge of American troops ordered by President Obama in 2009. The 30,000 extra troops won back territory held by the Taliban, but by nearly all estimates failed to deal a crippling blow. Critics of the Obama administration say the United States also weakened its own hand by agreeing to the 2014 deadline for its own involvement in combat operations, voluntarily ceding the prize the Taliban has been seeking for over a decade. The Obama administration defends the deadline as crucial to persuading the Afghan government and military to assume full responsibility for the country, and politically necessary for Americans weary of what has already become the country's longest war. Among America's commanding generals here, from Stanley A. McChrystal and David H. Petraeus to today's John R. Allen, it has been an oft-repeated mantra that the United States is not going to kill its way out of Afghanistan. They said that the Afghanistan war, like most insurgencies, could only end with a negotiation. Now American officials say they have reduced their goals even further to patiently laying the groundwork for eventual peace talks after they leave. American officials say they hope that the Taliban will find the Afghan army a more formidable adversary than they expect and be compelled, supposedly, in the years after NATO withdraws, to come to terms with what they now dismiss as a puppet government. With the end of this year's fighting season, the Taliban have weathered the biggest push the American-led coalition is going to make against them. A third of all American forces left by this month, and more of the 68,000 remaining may leave next year, with the goal that only a residual force of trainers and special operations troops will remain by the end of 2014. Bringing Pakistan into the search for Taliban contacts is also an uncertain strategy, American officials said. The details of the new vetting committee have yet to be worked out, and if we are depending on Pakistan, it comes with an asterisk. One of the officials said, "We never know whether they will see it through." The American shift toward a more peripheral role in peace efforts represents another retreat from Washington's once broad designs for Afghanistan, where the surge, along with a sharp escalation of nighttime raids by special operations forces against Taliban field commanders were partly aimed at forcing the Taliban into negotiations, making a Western withdrawal more feasible. For a brief moment, the strategy appeared to be working, but the effort fell apart when the Obama administration, faced with bipartisan opposition in Washington, could not make good on a proposed prisoner swap in which 5 Taliban leaders held at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, would have been exchanged for the sole American soldier held by the insurgents. The trade was to be an initial confidence-building measure that would lead to more serious talks. If it is revived by the Obama administration, it would come after the presidential election, most likely leaving too little time to reach a deal before 2014, some current and former American officials said. In Washington, the tone of the whole discussion has shifted to a less U.S.-led approach and toward a more Afghan-led approach, but one that will be over a longer term, or so they say. Divisions between the Taliban's political wing and its military commanders represent another obstacle to serious talks. When the talks first became public, the military wing of the Taliban was very critical. They were angry to have learned of the talks through President Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan, who was the first official to talk of them publicly. The Taliban have long derided Mr. Karzai as an American puppet, and they have steadfastly refused to talk with his government. Then the Americans failed to make good on the prisoner swap, leaving the negotiators feeling betrayed. A senior coalition officer said that the insurgents who supported the process didn't do a good I.O. campaign to sell it to their people. I.O. is military jargon for information operations. When the Karzai government brought it out into the open and the hardliners balked, we understood they were backpedaling hard. The prospects for direct negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban are even murkier. A former Taliban minister who now sits on the High Peace Council, the Karzai's administration's separate peace effort, dismissed the notion that the Taliban will never talk to the Afghan government. They will continue saying that until the day they sit at the negotiating table, he said, who once ran the Taliban's notorious Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. However, he also said that he had been asked by the High Peace Council to carry proposals for direct talks to the Taliban and was rebuffed. They said, "Reconcile with this corrupt government? Reconcile with this?" I had no answer, the former Taliban minister added. In other words, the question should be asked, what exactly has been won in this 11 going on 12-year-old war? And this too is another sign of the end of times as we know them, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary happenings, changes, and events, because it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Luke chapter 21, verse 6. As for these things which ye behold, the days will come in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. 7. And they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? 8. And he said, Take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draws near. Go ye not therefore after them. 9. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, Be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. 10. Then Jesus said unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. 11. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. Revelation chapter 8, verse 12. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. 13. And I beheld, and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound. Yes, it's time for the manifestation and fulfillment of prophecy, and all these are more signs.